Welcome to Preparing Your Hometown for Electric Transit. We're really looking forward to talking to this morning about how you can get your hometown prepared. And mostly it's not just for larger cities and big cities and college towns. We can have electric vehicles in smaller towns as well. And we want to show you how to do that. Before we get started, some of you, just to kind of equalize the playing field, we use a lot of acronyms and such, but there's a list of some terms that you'll be able to refer back to. So when you do start working with your utilities and OEMs and such to get electrification started in your town, you'll be operating on the same language as they are. So you can come back and refer to this later. So this is being brought to you today by about 5 different Clean Cities coalitions. And Clean Cities it's a network of coalitions across the country that we build partnerships, and we want to advance affordable domestic transportation fuels and technologies. We are that partner that links you to all the resources that you need to get started as you go forward in your alternative fuel projects. So if you do not have a Clean Cities coalition in your town, there should be one nearby. There are about 75 of us across the country. And the ones represented here today are from Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. And so if you want to reach out to any of us, we'll all be happy to help you. So how does Clean Cities fit within the Department of Energy? The Vehicle Technology Office is in the EERE, which is Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Division of the Department of Energy. And they focus their efforts on battery electrification, materials technology, energy efficient mobility systems, advanced engine and fuel. And within there also is nestled the Clean Cities Coalition program in technology integration. So each of us is an independent organization. Some of us are hosted in state energy offices, some of us in MPOs or COGs, and some of us are independent nonprofits like Louisiana Clean Fuels is. And our main goal is to work with the communities, work with public and private fleets to aid you with financial assistance, help you with grant applications, help you understand the tax incentives and such in your area. We provide you with information and tools and resources, technical assistance, and training outreach and partnerships. So we host a lot of workshops and educational opportunities to help advance your projects. In our portfolio, we deal with all the different types of on-road vehicles, light, medium, heavy duty. We do dabble with off-road, a little bit into marine and rail and such, but we mostly focus on the on-road transportation, alternative fuels and renewable energy, renewable fuels and infrastructure, and anything that reduces your fuel usage, whether it's idle reduction, fuel economy improvements. A gallon of fuel that is not used is that much less emissions that are on the road. So if we can get you to be more efficient with your fuel usage, then we will do that as well. And new mobility choices. So looking at transportation as a whole, as a system, not just the individual vehicle or the individual fleet, or the practices, the driving practices of your fleets and your drivers. This is looking at the system as a whole. And again, we're the ones that are here to help you make the connections. We're technical problem solving assistance. We're going to connect you to those opportunities. We're going to bring those partnerships together to help advance your projects. And we're going to make sure you're working with the very best, most recent information to make the best decisions possible for your fleet. All right, so we're going to get started now with the meat of the material here. And the Tulsa area Clean Cities, Central Oklahoma, Lone Star, Clean Fuels Alliance, and Central Kansas Clean Cities are all partners here in this project with us. And we're really happy to have them all here today. So these are today's presenters. We have Adrian and Eric are from Oklahoma, Elizabeth from Texas, Tammy from Kansas, and we have our guest speakers, Chris Nielsen and Eric Austin, who will be part of our moderated panel at the end. And I am Ann. So nice to meet you all. All right, we're going to get started here with a brief electric vehicle overview just to make sure we're all operating kind of on the same basic level. We did a similar presentation a little while back, all of us, preparing your hometown for electric vehicles, where we focused more on charging infrastructure in your communities. And this is just a slide from that presentation to kind of give you all a little base in a background in case you missed that one. But EV owners will plan their trips around where they can charge. And it is a great way to bring attention to businesses in local areas. And, you know, where sites near interstates are especially desirable because of the alternative fuel corridors by the Federal Highway Administration, which we'll talk a tiny bit about later. Electric vehicle sales really have been strong. Even in this economy that's been a little wonky over the last year, electric vehicles now account for 7.8% of the total first quarter sales in the United States, but that includes hybrid vehicles, not just plug-in vehicles. And we're going to go through those definitions in just a minute so you can understand the difference. But you know, there are 98,000 electric vehicles purchased in the first quarter of this year. So it's phenomenal increase over last year's. And if you look down at the bottom here, electric vehicle registrations by state, this is a graph that can be found on the AFDC, Alternative Fuel Data Center, but it shows where we rank. Like with us, Louisiana, we rank down in the 48th, which not so great, but we're working on it. We have a lot to improve. Another tool that you're going to be hearing about a lot is the Alternative Fuel Station Locator, AFDC Station Locator, and the website's right here. And you can search by the different types of alternative fuels. You can search by with electric vehicles. You can search on whether it's level 2 or level 3. And you can search by location. You can go by state, or you can go down to the city level. And we have the electric vehicle search. This electric vehicle search is a great tool, and I have highlighted here the electric and plug-in hybrid. You can look for passenger vans and transit buses. These are what are currently on the market, not what's coming soon. This is what is available for purchase now. All right, so our definitions here. Hybrid electric vehicle, HEVs. They're powered by an engine and an electric motor, and it does not use an electric vehicle supply equipment to charge the battery. So this is your standard hybrid. The plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, oh, I didn't have my video on. So the plug-in hybrid electric vehicle is, you do plug it in, and it does have the ability to use gasoline or fuel, but it does not power the engine. It's just a means by which, kind of like having an onboard generator to charge your battery. So you are plugging it in and you are using electricity, but it still has the ability to use liquid fuels. Now, the all electric vehicle, that is your EV, or you will see it sometimes BEV, battery electric vehicle. And this is 100% electric, does not use any other type of fuel to move the vehicle forward. So that way you got your definitions down here. We're going to be talking a little bit about the different types of charging infrastructure. Level 1, level 2, and DC fast are the main terms you're going to be hearing us talking about. And the main question we hear all the time is, how fast can you charge a vehicle? How long does it take to charge? And we always say, well, that depends. It depends on the state of charge of your battery. But a good rule of thumb is for level 1 chargers, this is your regular outlet. Like if you were just to plug in a lamp or something into the wall, you would get about 2 to 5 miles of range per hour. That's how we think of it. Not how full the tank is, but how many miles can we go? And how many miles do we get for every hour of charging? A level 2 charger, you can get 10 to 20 miles of range per hour of charging. At my level 2 charger in my garage, I can get 33 miles of range per charge, but that depends on your specific vehicle and your charger. DC fast charging, these are the ones that are usually by the interstate. These are the ones that you're going to get the closest to the gas station feel as possible, where you can get 60 to 80 miles of range for every 20 minutes of charging. So you go in, you go to the restroom, you get your lunch, you come back out, and generally your car is fully charged up and ready to go again. And if you want to learn a little bit more about the alternative fuel corridors that I mentioned before, here's the website. This is an unfunded program that allows state DOTs to put up signage that lets motorists know that they're on an interstate that has sufficient charging for their particular type of alternative fuel, and you can charge. So an electric vehicle corridor, if you've seen alternative fuel corridor signage that says electric vehicles, you know that every 50 miles, within 5 miles of the interstate, you will have a universal fast charger available for you to charge up. And just want to give you a few quick questions here. These are great questions to ask when you're first getting started. And I put this in here for reference so that you would have this available when you do start talking and working on getting some electric vehicles in your town for your transit fleets. Basically, you're going to understand the lay of the land with your federal, state, and local incentives. What are your driving needs? How much energy will your fleet need, and when will they need it? What type of EV is best for me? The charger type that best matches your fleet. When and where will they be plugged in? Are there charging stations in your area? And what support can your Clean Cities Coalition provide? Basically, we can help you with all of these things, but the next best person that you will need to call, no matter what you're doing with any fleet of electrification, is going to be your utility. All right, so we're going to get started with our regional updates by our Clean Cities coordinators here, and we're going to kick things off with Oklahoma.
Hi, Ann. Thanks for having me. Hi, I'm Adrienne Janes from Tulsa. And so if you could flip to the next slide, we'll get right into our Oklahoma update. So we've got lots of things going on in Oklahoma around electrification, and those are by no means limited to the metropolitan areas. The biggest news we've had lately is that a firm called Canoe, they're an EV startup that is currently scaling. They have announced that their factory is going to be in a little town called Pryor, Oklahoma. It's about 45 minutes outside of Tulsa, and they're planning to bring 2,000 EV manufacturing jobs to Pryor, Oklahoma. Also in Pryor, there's a Google data center there, and so I feel like Pryor, Oklahoma is, if you're a fan of the show Parks and Rec, Pryor, Oklahoma might be like Pawnee was at the end of that series where the tech firm moves to Pawnee and everything changes a little bit, but it's exciting. Everyone's excited about the potential for EV manufacturing jobs to be here in Oklahoma. Then we've got another picture there. I'm going to skip around a little bit. So sticking with the manufacturing, the school bus there, international school bus, those buses have been made here in Oklahoma for a long time. And they have just launched production on their all electric buses. So we're really excited to have, we already have electric buses being made in Oklahoma, and we're going to have more when we have more vehicles being manufactured here when the Canoe plant opens in a few years. Then at the bottom there, you see an Amazon van. That is one of Amazon's all electric trucks. They placed an order for about 100,000 all electric trucks a few years ago from a company called Rivian, and those have started production, and I think they'll go into service later this year. But earlier in the spring here in Oklahoma, we had one of the prototypes running around being put through its paces here in Oklahoma. So it was making deliveries in Tulsa, but also to the outlying communities as well to test the range and, see how it did, have Oklahoma put it through its paces. And I, from my understanding, I think it performed really well. And then at the top, you see a transit bus, and we've got 4 transit agencies in the state that are either deploying or about to deploy electric buses. And so the 2 metro areas, of course, Oklahoma City launched theirs earlier this year. Tulsa is launching their electric buses, their first batch next week. But again, we've got 2 other fleets that are definitely we want to highlight as well. One is Norman, Oklahoma. They've just put an order in for electric buses a few months ago, so they'll be here in a year or so. And that Norman, Oklahoma is outside of Oklahoma City, is the home of University of Oklahoma. And then we've also got Cherokee Nation has several buses, both one in their school fleet and then a few in their transit fleet. And we'll talk more about that later in the presentation, but just an exciting thing I want to highlight here as well. Next slide. Then I always put this slide in my presentations. I like to brag on this company because A question I always get when I talk about electric vehicles is what happens to the batteries when the cars, when they go bad, or when the car, is scrapped. And so there's a company here in Oklahoma where most of the batteries from EVs and hybrids that go bad, they end up here, and they are recycled or remanufactured or repurposed into a variety of other applications. And so, it's not specifically rural. I always like to highlight this Oklahoma company that's working really hard to close the loop on the battery situation to make sure that none of them end up in landfills, and that we reuse those critical minerals and materials in productive ways, and they don't go to waste. Next slide. We have EVs in every county in Oklahoma now. This was a milestone we hit earlier this year. These are numbers from January. We need to get updated ones. I think they'll be even better next time we get it updated. But we're really excited to see that we do actually have at least one, and some it is literally one EV in every county across the state. So it's not just an urban phenomenon. I mean, that's where a lot of it is happening. But EVs are literally in every county across the state at this point. So, we're doing our best to make sure that they have the resources they need and that people understand this is an option for you. So we're really excited with this milestone. Next slide. And then again, you'll hear more about this later from Eric Austin from Francis Energy. But here in Oklahoma, we already have today, we've got chargers every 50 to 80 miles. In the Panhandle, it gets a little bit stretched out, but along most of our highways and interstates, we've got chargers about every 50 miles. There's very few places in Oklahoma you can't get in an EV, and I've been putting the network through its paces this summer. I've been all over the state trying to do on day trips and all kind of stuff, and I'm proud to say I've been able to go everywhere without a problem that I've needed to go. So we're thrilled about this network, and Eric will tell you more about it. Eric's company, Francis Energy, is the one that is behind installing most of these chargers, and so we're thrilled with how it's all worked out. Next slide. All right, that's the end of mine.
And the beginning of mine. I'm Elizabeth Munger, the director of the Lone Star Clean Fuels Alliance, which is the clean cities serving Central Texas. And I'm happy to tell you a bit about what we're doing. Our area in Central Texas, you can see it's centered around Austin. Austin itself is quite urban, but outside of Austin, it's fairly rural. And you can see in the upper right-hand corner, we've got a count of electric vehicles that are registered by county. And these are the 5 counties that our Clean Cities Coalition covers. Austin is the bottom, Travis County. And that's actually the highest per capita number of EVs in the state of Texas. So that's due in large part to our electric utility. Once you move outside of Austin, though, you can see that we don't have a lot of EVs out there, and those are quite rural counties, although in some cases they've got some urban cores that are really starting to grow. At the bottom, you can see a list of EVSE, so EV charging by type in our area. And again, Travis County has the most, but other counties don't. Caldwell has nothing. Bastrop, which we'll be talking about today because that's where our rural transit is located, and the project that we're doing with our EVs and the rural transit has what looks like a pretty good number of level 1 charging. So that's what anyone could plug in using a wall outlet, and that's usually a charger that comes with a vehicle. And then it has 16 level 2, public level 2 chargers. The 10 level 1s and 10 of the 16 level 2s are located at an RV park. So that's a very creative way of utilizing the RV outlets there for charging for vehicles. But that gives you an idea that there isn't a lot there. But everything's growing. So we're balancing both the urban and the rural together. Next slide, please. And our utilities are also a mix. Austin Energy, which covers the city of Austin, is extremely aggressive with the programs that they've instituted for both charging and putting EVs out there. They've got rebates for workplace and multifamily charging. They've got rebates for purchasing electric vehicles. And the utilities outside of the Austin area, which would include Bluebonnet and Pedernales, in addition to quite a few small municipally owned, are much smaller in scope, or maybe in the case of PEC, while they are large, they cover a very rural wide area. So most of their assistance with charging has come in the form of not rebates, but putting charging stations in at specific destination places or at their own locations to use them as sort of marquee projects, showing people how they work and trying to further understanding through that. And that ends my slides.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So Tammy, you're up.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you everybody for coming today. So a little bit about me. I'm with Metropolitan Energy Center is the name of our head nonprofit that hosts the Central Kansas Clean Cities Coalition, which is what I'm part of. I'm based in Wichita, Kansas, which is the largest city in Kansas. But we also host the Kansas City Regional Clean Cities Coalition, which covers Kansas City area and Western Missouri. Central Kansas, we cover the entire state of Kansas. So just to give you a little bit of an idea, we have a little bit of a cross-state workings that we do. Most of my information is going to be about Kansas though. Next slide. So charging in Kansas. This is a look at all of the electric vehicle chargers level 2 and DC fast charging that are available in Kansas. As you can see, there's a little bit of a dearth there in Southwest Kansas where there is not much charging available. And most of the charging is, as you would expect, kind of focused in the Kansas City area, along the interstates. There's getting to be some more in Wichita, although not a lot, but it is growing. So next slide. So overall, Kansas has 450 charging locations. As you can see from that other map, there's over 800 charging ports at those 450 locations. But this map here shows just the DC fast charge locations. There are only 25 locations where we have DC fast charging along the interstate. And again, you can see there's no charging in Southwest Kansas. So that makes it difficult to travel between locations, between cities in Southwest Kansas. Most of the locations that are marked obviously are along interstate highways, which is where you would expect to have the DC fast charging. There are some additional Tesla supercharger locations that aren't on this map. Most of them are located in cities that are marked with a green dot for the non-proprietary DC fast charging, but we also have a Tesla supercharger in Colby, which is on the very western, Goodland on the very western part of I-70, and then in Emporia, you can kind of see that in the center of the eastern part of the state. So next slide. So this is a plan that we worked on in Kansas to put DC fast charging all around the state so that travel across the state could happen easily for people that chose to drive electric vehicles. You can see the green dots, that's the existing DC fast charging. We have a planned DC fast charger that's being built right now in Goodland, Kansas, to fill that out. And then we've got, kind of our wish list of where we would like to see locations, red, yellow, blue in order of priority, where we'd like to have those put out. We put this plan together to give to the state to hopefully use the Volkswagen funding that's going to be coming out to fund the building of chargers. We've heard that that's hopefully going to be coming out next month. So really excited about that, and hopefully we can get some more DC fast charging in Kansas. So next slide, please. So in Kansas, total number of EVs in Kansas is not real high. As of 2020, we had 6,153 total pluggable electric vehicles. That includes 3,400 fully electric vehicles, 2,700 pluggable hybrid electric vehicles, but that is only about 0.2% of all the vehicles in Kansas. So we have ways to go. Most of these, obviously, for reasons, as you can see from the charging, are focused in the larger metropolitan areas of Kansas City, Topeka, and Wichita. So next slide, please. So for incentives and charging in Kansas, Kansas is served, as you would expect, by a mix of small electric co-ops and small municipal utilities. There is one smaller investor-owned utility in Southeast Kansas that covers a portion of the state down there. And then there's a very large investor-owned utility that covers Wichita, parts of the KC Metro, and a lot of the eastern third of Kansas, although there's also in that territory mixed in a lot of the co-ops and small small municipal utilities as well. Currently, there are very few incentives for charging or for EVs in Kansas, other than, of course, the federal tax rebate that exists. Kansas Power Pool, that's a collection of 20 to 30 small municipal utilities. They do have a rebate for installing level 2 charging equipment in any of their areas. And that can be for residential charging if you want to put one in your garage to purchase your own EV, or if you want to have workplace charging at your business, or public charging, whatever. But there's a $1,500 rebate on installation of level 2 charging, which is great. Evergy, the main IOU that covers the large portion of the state, they've applied for approval from the Kansas Corporation Commission to have some charging incentives. They're still waiting to hear back on that because they're investor owned. They have to go through that approval process. They do have some time of use rates that are optimum for charging, and they'll work with you on that. Especially if you want to do your charging overnight, you can get a really good rate. They're hopeful that some of their incentives, they might have some charging incentives, some make ready incentives for new buildings, etc. But until that gets approved by KCC, they just don't know what's going to be approved with that. And as I mentioned, we're hopeful that the Volkswagen funding is going to be coming out next month. Kansas set aside the maximum 15% that they could for electric vehicle charging, and that amounts to $2.3 million in Kansas for EVSE infrastructure. So we're hopeful that that will be coming out, and we'll be able to get some more fast charging infrastructure around the state. We have had, in addition to some of these that are available now, we have had some of the smaller utilities that have worked with their customers, especially if they're looking to put in charging on demand charges and charging rates. So I strongly suggest, if you're interested, check with your utility and see if they're willing to work with you on charging rates, maybe some rebates or some other incentives. Definitely, if you have a smaller utility that's a co-op or a municipal, they have a little more flexibility than some of those investor-owned utilities that are overseen by the regulators. And that should be it for me.
Thank you, Tammy. All right, so Louisiana Clean Fuels, we cover most of the state of Louisiana, and we receive additional funding from the Department of Natural Resources, but we are an independent nonprofit. So we do have another Clean Cities Coalition that covers the remainder of the state, and that is the Southeast Louisiana Clean Fuel Partnership. So no matter where you are in Louisiana, you will be covered by Clean Cities Coalition. Unlike Oklahoma, we still have a few parishes, we're parishes here in Louisiana instead of counties, that do not have any electric vehicles. And if you notice, the main metropolitan areas, we have New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Lafayette, Lake Charles, Monroe, and the Shreveport area. And Alexandria here in the center of the state is where we have most of our electric vehicles. We are 48th in the nation in EV adoption. So not the best, but we are improving. So we're small but mighty. We will be getting there. If you take a look at the AFDC station locator, these are the amount of stations that we have currently in the state of Louisiana. I added in our other alternative fuels just for reference, so you can get an idea of how it's spread out across the state. Now, only 5 of our fast chargers are the universal non-Tesla chargers, and they're all along the I-10 corridor along here. So we do not have any DC fast chargers that are universal, in other words, non-Tesla, up on I-29 or I-49, so only I-10. And the amount of fleets that we have utilizing electric vehicles is small but growing. So it's getting larger every day. And with the announcement of the Ford Lightning F-150 and some of the other new vehicles, we're starting to get a lot of interest in with municipal fleets in adding EVs to their fleet. So far, the Chevy Bolt has been a very popular vehicle. And I've had some police departments asking about Teslas and the Ford Mach-E for their patrol cars. So there's a lot of interest that is beginning to grow in Louisiana. We have our Department of Environmental Quality has a Bolt. Entergy has made a lot of investment in electric vehicles. We have the Water Campus, and LUS is the Lafayette Utility System. They have some Nissan Leafs. We have 2 transit agencies that have electric vehicles. We have Sportran up in Shreveport, has the Proterra buses, and the Capital Area Transit System, or CATS, in Baton Rouge has the BYD transit buses. Now, I don't have any of my small rural areas or my smaller towns utilizing electric buses yet, so we will not be participating in the case study section, but we do have the larger electric buses for our larger metropolitan areas, and they are all working very well. And each of these transit agencies is planning on expanding their use of electric vehicles in their fleets. They're having some really good experience with that, so we're excited. While we may be behind, like a little bit behind with some of these other states and trying to catch up, we have a lot of programs going on and a lot of funding coming in that will really help us to incentivize and to move the needle and to try to get more EV adoption in the state of Louisiana. Last year, we were one of 14 states who won a grant to accelerate adoption of electric vehicles. And it's the Drive Electric USA is the name of the grant program. And each of the states in this program is forming Drive Electric chapters. So we will be forming approximately 3 Drive Electric Louisiana chapters across the state, where more individuals and organizations can get involved, and we can have a one central statewide program for incentivizing the use of electric vehicles. So you'll be learning a lot more about that. And if you would like to volunteer and join us, you can go to our website, driveelectriclouisiana.org, and sign up to volunteer. Or you can just email me and we will get you connected and put you on the list for when these groups get launched. Now, a couple of years ago, we did do a DC fast charging master plan, similar to what Tammy did for their Volkswagen settlement. So we did is we analyzed the charging infrastructure that we already had. As you can see, back in 2019, the only corridor that had fast charging was our I-10, a little bit of I-12. So when you look at the alternative fuel corridors, which will be on a later slide, you'll see that we only have portions of I-10 as either pending or complete. Since then, we have added at least one or two more DC fast chargers on this bottom corridor, but we still have yet to have any fast chargers on I-49 or I-20. And this plan is what our DEQ is utilizing or has utilized to help inform some of their award decisions for DC fast chargers. While the proposal period is closed for Louisiana's Volkswagen settlement, the awards are being negotiated and announced very soon, and we should know what chargers are going to be installed and awarded according to that plan. It's been a long time in the making, but it's been a difficult and long year, so we should have some really great announcements coming out of our DEQ in the near future about the awards under that program. And excuse me, my cat always wants to be the center of attention. So in Louisiana, our tax credit to purchase an electric vehicle just ended. It was set to end in January 1st of 2022, but legislation that was passed in June just last month ended the tax credit on July 1st. So there are no more vehicle tax credits in the state of Louisiana. So if you purchased your vehicle before July 1st, you're in luck. If you that means you have to have received the vehicle, not just placed an order. So if you procured your vehicle before then, you're fine. You can still get the tax credit. But if you purchase the vehicle after July 1st or after, you will not get the tax credit. The infrastructure tax credit will be in place until the end of the year. And that is to build the alternative fuel stations, including electric vehicles. And again, that tax credit was not just for electric vehicles, it was for all alternative fuels. So natural gas, propane, anything, if you procured any of those after July 1st, you will not get the credit. And we did have the VW settlement, but the proposals, it's closed for proposals and we are awaiting those awards. And there's still federal tax incentives, but hopefully some of these will get rebooted. I know there's been a lot of talk about allowing Tesla and Chevrolet to start allowing the federal tax credit again, but they phased out because they reached the maximum production numbers. In our state, we do have some utility rebates. Entergy is offering rebates for electric vehicle chargers and pretty much electrification of almost anything in your business. So, but specifically, if you want to look at the vehicles and the charging infrastructure, if you're an individual or if you're a business, go to their website. It's entergyetech.com, and you can get, proposals from them and quotes from them on the kind of rebates if you are in Entergy's service area. If you're in SWEPCO's service area, this is their website. You go to their website and look for clean energy, electric cars, and then charging station. And they have rebates for individuals who are purchasing chargers as well. And there's more information in there. So it's not all bad news with our tax credits going away. And we do have the incentives from the utilities, but we also have the Governor's Climate Initiative Task Force. And we've been working for about almost a year now. I'm part of one of the subcommittees on the transportation subcommittee, and we're working on presenting a plan to the governor that the governor will then hopefully implement in about maybe another year, probably next year. And we have some ambitious goals. We were meeting what the rest of the country is doing. We want to be net zero by 2050. And if you go to this website, you go to the Office of the Governor, a Climate Initiative Task Force, you can follow along our meetings and see how we're doing and watch recordings of the past meetings, because this is all open to the public. It's a very interesting process, and we really hope that we get legislative support and that some of the things that we suggest will end up coming to fruition. Now, when we're preparing our hometowns for electric transit, we want to know who's done it, who's had success, and get some tips from them and some lessons learned. And that's where we are in the presentation today. We're going to start off by hearing from some success stories from Oklahoma, then Texas, and then Kansas. And then we're going to move into a moderated panel with our two guest speakers. So we're starting off here with Oklahoma.
Hi, Adrienne again. So this one isn't specifically transit, but I wanted to highlight that a community that's done some charging projects well. And we were on our way back on a road trip a couple of weeks ago and stopped to charge in Durant, Oklahoma, which is just a little town on the Oklahoma-Texas border. And I got to say, we've been driving through this town for 25 years on my way to visit family in other places. And I've never pulled off the highway until this trip to charge. And the chargers were well located right off Main Street. And we stopped to get pizza, and we went to a local brewery and walked around the town. And we only needed about 20 minutes of charge, but we stayed for over an hour because we were just having a good time. So this isn't a picture of the chargers per se, but it's the city did a good job with their wayfinding sign. So as I'm standing there waiting for my pizza, I noticed this wayfinding sign in Durant that has both EV chargers listed on their wayfinding signs, around the little Main Street. And in addition, they've also got the world's largest peanut memorial. And so, it was only a block away. So we had to go check that out as well. So anyway, we've talked a long time. Those of us who've been, working in electrification have said, there is a lot here for rural communities because that time that it takes to charge, while some people see it as a liability, you can view it as an asset for your community and really get people into your town in a way that they have never needed to before, because gas is just so fast and quick, and you can just fuel up and be on your way, grab some McDonald's and go. But, we stopped at 2 local businesses and walked around the town and had a great time. So anyway, Durant, Oklahoma is doing it right. Just wanted to point them out. Next slide. So this one is in McAlester, Oklahoma. And so this is not a transit agency, but it's a private business that has entered into, the transportation sector. So this is a company called Rover Taxi. They're an all-electric taxi company in McAlester, Oklahoma, and he's standing by what I've been told is the most heavily utilized charger in the state. And it's because it's right there in the parking lot of his taxi service. And they drive, it's an app-based service, and they drive people, all over the region because transportation is it's a high need there. There's not great transit service out there. There's a lot of poverty, and so a lot of people don't have cars, or it's very expensive, to travel long distances in an inefficient car. And so they're filling this gap in filling a real need there in McAlester, and people are riding in EVs and loving it. And this guy, his name's Brian, and he started this business from scratch, coded the app, bought the cars, just done a great job of using electric vehicles to provide transportation in a rural context, and traveling very far distances, relatively, especially as a taxi, it's a long way. So anyway, Rover Taxi, they don't have a website, but you can follow them on Facebook, and they're a great little service. And if you ever find yourself in need of a taxi in McAlester, check them out. They're great. Next slide. This is Cherokee Nation. Cherokee Nation, I'm so proud and honored to be able to work with them. They have really embraced EVs in a way that is fairly unexpected in eastern Oklahoma. It's a sparsely populated region, but they have made a commitment to put charging throughout their tribal territory. They started out with this solar canopy. You can see kind of on the top left corner there. It's a solar canopy, and they started with 4 electric chargers and recently had to upgrade to 8 because they were running out of room because they bought some EVs for their fleet. And then their employees, it's a workplace charging installation as well. And so they've had a lot of employees buy EVs because the charging is there, it's available, and they're setting the example and showing people that they can get it done. But on the transit side, I think it's even more exciting. They got a couple of grants, some from Volkswagen, some through Lono, if you're familiar with transit funding through Federal Transit Authority or agency, FTA. Anyway, so they've got two fully electric transit buses that will go into service later this year, and those will be running employment routes throughout Cherokee Nation's territory from Tahlequah, Oklahoma to Catoosa, Oklahoma to West Silent Springs, Oklahoma. Taking people to work at the various casinos and taking them to hospitals and various reasons they need to travel to get around through their territory. So we're really excited that those are going to be in service soon. All the language on the bus is bilingual, English and Cherokee. So it's again, like just integrating well into the culture and providing people, more context to see the language and so that it's not forgotten. They've lost several of their native speakers recently, and so they're really committed to preserving their heritage and language. Then the school bus as well it runs to Sequoia High School, which is their main high school there in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. And again, they run a bilingual immersion program, again, English and Cherokee there in Sequoia. And so that bus is providing transportation and providing a way for them to preserve their heritage and, just continue their commitment to their culture, but also to the earth. There's a couple of great videos on Motor Week that were recently highlighted this project, just talking about their commitment to 7 generations and making sure that the earth is there. And so it's all part of their context. And we're just really proud of the work they're doing. They are looking to add more chargers, and they're looking to add more vehicles as well. And I will add, this has not been without obstacles. They've had challenges along the way, but they're really committed, and they're looking to add electric box trucks and as many things as they can add. They're excited to add them. So that's what's going on in Oklahoma.
Thank you, Adrienne. So we're going to move on to Elizabeth Munger, who is going to talk about one of their fantastic success stories. Elizabeth?
Thank you, Anne. I'm talking about low-speed electric vehicles as part of a transit project. And you can see the low-speed electric vehicle in the transit application. It's pictured right there. And before we start into the presentation, a low-speed electric vehicle is not a golf cart. What it is a vehicle that can travel up to 25 miles an hour. And in Texas, on roadways with posted speeds of 45 miles an hour or less. It requires the driver to have a driver's license. It's a vehicle that's registered at the Department of Motor Vehicles, and it has to have a license plate. And you can also see that it comes with seat belts, and those are required to be worn at all times. So it's very much a street-worthy vehicle, and it's frequently used in micro-transit applications. And this is one with a transit, but it can be used in a variety of other applications throughout. Chris is currently using them in different types of settings. So next slide. So microtransit is typically referred to as a demand response transit. And I remember using, when I was in college, dial a ride, dial a bus. And this is that's what this was, maybe the traditional, but now we've got something that's even better. So it's app driven. And in this case, CARTS, our Capital Area Rural Transit System, that's what we call them, CARTS, has both an app and phone in for on-demand trips. And the reason that they chose this project was because they felt that there were efficient ways, that these vehicles would be efficient ways of extending their transit's reach. So whether it was taking people from a transit station to another place or vice versa, or just getting them out in about a specific area more easily and more efficiently, that's what they were testing in this. Most of the applications are curb to curb rather than point to point. And currently we're following the COVID restrictions. And so we've got one passenger or one set of passengers in the vehicle at a time, but this could be a stop to stop with 2 or more passengers along the route. And in the map that you see in the center there is the gray area. The whole gray area is where the on-demand program is operating. The specific area for the low-speed electric vehicle portion of that program, you can see is in the gray area with the white lines, and the circle really demarcates that. And this is a downtown area. It's got plenty of restaurants and retail. It's got stores, just a variety of things. The library is down there. You can see that there are 2 carts denoted with the C in them, two cart stations. Just a whole variety of different areas. So there's a lot of foot traffic. There's parking situations down there. So this makes a real efficient way of getting people around and about. Next slide, please. And there's some information about the vehicles themselves. They're a Polaris Gem E6, so all electric. They can hold 6 passengers. Use a 110 wall charger. The range on a full charge is approximately 60 miles, but as Anne was saying, that does depend on a variety of factors for her, how much charging she got. Temperature would be one of those. And the nice thing about these vehicles is that they're really low maintenance. So they do quarterly preventative maintenance, and you can see what that typically entails. This is a paratransit that eCab upfit to create the paratransit, and that was a requirement of the project, that there be a paratransit low-speed electric vehicle available. And you can see that the vehicle is badged with the ridecarts.com website, and this enables people to download the app or to get information about how to call for a ride. Next slide. Okay, these currently the trips are Monday through Friday, and the service is free due to the grant. Most of the trips are less than 2 miles, and you can see on the right hand side just a random list of the different places that are either destinations or origins for this. So there's a lot of it's quite a mix. You can go to the grocery store, the UPS store, you can go to the park, City Hall, Film Alley, get food, go to the meat market, go to the elementary school. So it's a good way to take these shorter trips, and it's much more efficient. Next slide. So these vehicles have been operating since December 16th of last year. And we're coming at that point, heading out of the grim months of the pandemic and just getting back into the economy, opening up gradually, people feeling more comfortable, and some increased tourism in that area. And you can see over time the increase. So from December 16th to April 26th, you've got one set of statistics, and then the 2 months after that, approximately, you can see that the growth is in the 70s, 70%. So we're growing. Last time we looked at this, it was 130 passengers in a week. And so moving along, it's popular, it's fun, and I'm going to turn it back over. And if you've got questions, please pummel Chris with them, because he's eager to talk about his successes there.
Thank you, Elizabeth. All right, so next up we have Tammy to talk about their school bus project.
Hi. So Kansas, we've got several locations that are using electric vehicles. Wichita, our largest city, has some electric buses in their transit. Topeka has some on order. I'm not sure they've received them yet, but they're going to be moving to electric buses. In Western Missouri, the Kansas City, Missouri runs them. There's some electric buses at the airport in Kansas City. But those are all metropolitan areas. So I wanted to talk about a rural area that is using electric buses. And that's there's a project in Knox County, Missouri. It's in northern Missouri, north of Columbia, which is where University of Missouri, or Mizzou, is located, to kind of give you some perspective of where it is. But the school district there, they did their research. They found they had several routes that could be supported by an electric bus range. And so they decided that they wanted to do a pilot on electric buses. They wanted some cleaner air for their students and drivers. They wanted, they were interested in the reduced fuel and maintenance costs. And then additionally, some of the ability to potentially support the grid if necessary. So they decided to do this pilot project with one bus to find out if it would work for them, and to see how much they could save, see if they had any issues that they didn't foresee, and how that would work out for them. They chose the Lion C school bus from Lion Electric. There's several electric school buses out there, but this was the one that they decided upon. And it was delivered in February of this year. So they ran it in the snow. They've been running it a little bit over the summer for some special events in the heat. And so far, they've been pretty happy with it. So the kids love it. The kids absolutely love it. They have 4 to 5 drivers who are fairly regular. They kind of switch it off on different routes to get information on how it works on the routes. And 4 to 5 drivers who've driven it, and most of them really love it. And basically the whole point of their pilot is to find some cost of ownership information, any maintenance issues, etc. So next slide. So the bus in total was a cost of $338,000, just over that. And so that's a lot of money for a small school district to spend on one bus. So what they did is they pooled the funding in order to be able to afford the bus. They used some funding from the Missouri Volkswagen settlement. That was the about half of the cost of the bus, a little over half. They received a USDA grant to help fund it. They got some funding from Associated Electric. That's the electric co-op that services their area. Also, the Rural Electric Cooperative in Missouri it's the cooperative of all of the co-ops. They chipped in some. So the cost to the district was only $7,500 for this bus. So that's how they were able to make it work. And I strongly suggest, if you're in those rural areas, pool that funding, get that funding together so that you can afford this and start moving into the second part of this conversation, which is the fuel and maintenance savings. So that has turned out to be a really great opportunity for Knox School District. So far, like I say, they've been running it about half a year. They're saving 11 to 14 cents per mile with electric versus the cost at 31 to 38 cents per mile for diesel. And that was also on a special pre-purchase that they had for their diesel fuel. So the cost of diesel has gone up. Diesel's going to be higher this next year, so they anticipate they're going to be saving even more. Additionally, there's savings on the maintenance because they don't have to do oil changes. The brakes are regenerative braking, so they're saving money on the brakes. The tires are lasting longer. They're saving money on not having to replace the tires as often. They're estimating so far this year, based on what they've saved so far this year, approximately $4,000 a year in savings just on fuel and maintenance. And then additional savings, because they're getting so much extra distance on their brakes and tires, they think that could be as high as $5,000 per year because of just general savings. The composite body, it's not going to rust out like the diesel buses do, so they anticipate they may be able to run this longer, whereas a diesel bus has a 12 to 15 year life. They think they may be able to get, maybe 15 to 20 out of one of these buses. So they're able to run it longer. There's also the resale value of the batteries at the end of life of the bus. Those can be resold and repurposed. When batteries aren't able to be used in an electric vehicle anymore, you can still move them to other purposes, energy storage, for buildings, etc. So they're really excited about this bus project, and so far it's been working really great. Like I say, they ran it in the snow. They didn't have any issues. It was actually delivered in the middle of a snowstorm in February, and have really enjoyed it. They've got they're going about 75 miles a day on a typical route. They're only using about 62 miles of range with that because of the regenerative braking. They've got one driver who she's really awesome and has really figured out how to use the regenerative braking, and her range is well over the 125 miles that's posted for the bus. So it's working out really well for them, and they are really happy with it. And I would encourage you, they've got a website here. This is their website where you can go and you can follow the issue on the bus. And they're being very upfront about it. Some of the issues that they've had with the bus, they had some maintenance issues, mostly having to do with the learning curve of moving from a diesel bus to an electric. They installed the typical cameras inside the bus, and they didn't wire them, and the cameras were pulling the batteries down overnight when the buses were sitting parked. So they had to work through that and some different things like that just, like, as I said, the learning curve with how you work with an electric bus a little bit differently than a diesel bus. But overall, they're very happy with it. there's the site. An easier way to find it, if you just go to knoxr1.us, you can click on high school, then click on bus project, and then you'll see the EV bus project there, and you can view it from there. And I will also drop that link in the chat, and you can go home or go online and check out the information on their bus. And the superintendent of the school district there, he is really great to talk to. He'd be willing, if you just look him up, give him a call, he'd give you some information on it. So, and that's what I have.
Thank you, Tammy.
Sure.
Awesome. So we're going to be moving into the moderated discussion now, where if you have any questions for any of us about our projects, or if you have questions for Chris Nielsen and Eric Austin, as you listen to their to their Q&A section, you can put your questions in the Q&A. If you put your question in the chat, we will ask you to retype it into the Q&A. The chat is just for other discussions and for sharing links and such like that. So we're going to get started with this portion of the presentation. Sorry, my cat's being obnoxious. So Eric Pollard, he's going to take over and be your moderator for the next and final portion of our presentation today.
Thank you so much, Anne. Great presentations and great stories from around South Central US. So thanks for the opportunity. Eric Austin, I think I'm going to toss it to you. We heard Adrian talk a little bit about Francis Energy and some of the success we've seen in our region. If you want to touch on anything related to charging and considerations for charging, especially for rural communities and especially for rural transit, I'll turn it over to you, give you a couple minutes.
Absolutely. Thanks, Eric. So as Adriana mentioned, we're based out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. 2019 built out what a lot of people consider the first comprehensive statewide charging network there in Oklahoma. About every 50 miles, with the exception of the Panhandle region, you can find a DC fast charger. Some of those being 50 kW all the way up to about the 400 kW range. I think that's a little bit important to understand. We talked about different charging and different charging opportunities. Understand that these are dispensers. The car itself will determine what the acceptance of that charge actually is and the speed of that charge. I think we're going to get into that a little bit later, but I think that's important to know when we start talking about site selection. We're currently under construction in a few different areas across New Mexico, Missouri, and Arkansas, in addition to our continued build out in Oklahoma, and fully anticipate being in Texas and Kansas and continuing further east as well in the next couple of months. So very much exciting opportunities, exciting times to be in this arena.
Great, thanks, Eric. And so Chris, we heard Elizabeth give the great story from Bastrop and there in Texas with your company. Maybe just to expand on what Elizabeth talked about, if a community is thinking about working with you, what are the things they need to start thinking through when they contact you or they consider a service similar to what you got going on in the Austin area?
Well, most people have never even heard of a low-speed electric vehicle. We had a lot of fun trying to get permits back in 2008, whenever we first started out. Something to really consider is it costs hundreds of millions of dollars to just set up a transit agency in even a small town. I mean, rail costs $100 million a mile just to make. The cost of operating these vehicles is just a fraction of what it costs to operate a cutaway or a big diesel bus. And something that they should consider, or at least from our observation, is our type of vehicles handle that last mile, that microtransit service, and we can load and unload the vehicles in under 10 seconds. And that is the part of public transit that is the least efficient, because it takes a long time to stop a bus and load and unload passengers. So if they utilize us for their urban core, they can use their other assets to pick up passengers outside the rural community a lot more efficient, because they don't have to worry about the 2-mile rides.
Great. Yeah, and I think that's critical that, the more we can find ways to support existing transit, find ways to, have our streets be used for people instead of vehicles is a great step. So, Ann, do you want to talk about this poll real quick?
Yeah, sorry, we were supposed to launch this a little bit earlier, but we have a poll going on while we're having this discussion because we want to learn a little bit more about you, who you work for, and it'll help our panelists to understand a little bit more about what your needs are, what kind of questions you'd like to have asked. And again, we remind you, please put your questions in the Q&A for any of us. Thank you. Back to you, Eric.
So back to Chris. So what do you hear from some of your customers? So we had a similar company that was operating on the OU campus in Norman, and they were expanding quickly, and then the pandemic hit. So I feel for you guys because I know that was a huge challenge, and it sounds like you're coming out of it now. But you mentioned people don't know what those vehicles are. So what is that experience, and particularly in a rural area where you've got folks hopping on?
Well, it's a new thing. I'm pretty sure that Orville and Wilbur Wright probably had some problems trying to get FAA certification when the FAA didn't exist. It's kind of the same with us, whenever, and this still happens, whenever we get a new vehicle registered, we need to budget about 3 hours of time to be at the tax office. And it's not because they don't want to do it. It's just there are fewer than 200 of these in the whole state of Texas. So whenever we get there, chances are the clerk just has never done this process before and they just don't know how to do it. And the same thing for whenever we started in 2008, we had issues with law enforcement. They would pull us over just not knowing what we were. We weren't breaking any laws. They would just pull us over and say, "Hey, what is this?" And I had one pull us over and say, "Hey, you can't just put a license plate on a golf cart and drive down the street. Run the plates. This is real. It's a real registration sticker." But there's just not that many of them in existence. I mean, this current iteration of the Polaris Gem E6 that we operate, there have only been 5,000 of these made in the past 6 years. So it's just a rare vehicle. But people, because of that, though, we're able to charge quite a bit of money to advertise on the outsides of our vehicles because we like to call it the stare factor. Anytime you drive these around, everyone is pointing at it, they're taking pictures, and that really helps us with the big brands.
Great, thanks. So Eric Austin, I know you have a background with utilities, and a lot of communities, someone may be thinking about putting in charging. They may also be on the co-op board, or they may be with their municipal power group. So what are some of the utility considerations that you recommend communities look through? What kind of site considerations are you looking at, where placement of charging, and just kind of those infrastructure questions that you need to think through?
Absolutely. So, I mean, first and foremost, I think you need to take a look at what infrastructure already exists. So all of these DC fast chargers require 3-phase power. Most are going to be a 480 volt, so it's not going to be where you can just piggyback off of potentially existing transformers. Excuse me. But obviously an existing line, would work pretty well. I think what's also pretty important to know from a utility standpoint is these are fairly low usage, and I think they're going to be low usage for the next couple of years because we're starting to see that there's a significant amount of in-home charging that's being done, probably 75 to 80% right now. So I think we could probably split this question into two different parts. One of them, from a utility standpoint, especially financially, is kind of a loss leader. What you're trying to do is eliminate range anxiety while at the same time promoting the growth and the acceptance of electric vehicles. Having these chargers in your neighborhood, in your town, in your corridors, basically eliminates range anxiety and promotes the growth of electric vehicles, especially for those that may live in multi-housing or multifamily housing or somewhere where they don't have these charging infrastructures available. Two, it also shows that, hey, we're here, and kind of to Adrian's point of Duran earlier, there's an opportunity for people to stop in, whether it's tourists, whether it's just somebody coming in to get this charge and then get on down the road. It kind of puts a dot on the map for your town and for what you're able to provide. So from the utilities perspective only, there's an investment obviously that has to be made, whether that's on the public or the private side of this partnership. There's transformers, there's poles, there's wires, there's underground utilities, there's land lease agreements. There's a lot of things involved in getting this up and going. But what it does is when it does promote the growth of these in-home charging, now you're selling overnight high margin kilowatt hour sales. So you can kind of look at it as an investment, whether it's a marketing investment, whether it's a financial investment, however you want to justify what those costs are for that upfront. Basically, you're promoting the growth and the acceptance of these EV chargers. And then from, of course, the infrastructure side, oftentimes we visit with utilities, mostly because of our background of our utility department at Francis. We may have some relationships that already exist there, but it also kind of helps with finding, where do you feel the best host would be? We're not from Durant, we're not from this town. Kind of where do you see that this could be a good fit? Maybe they've already talked with potential site hosts. Maybe they've already kind of had an idea that this would work out pretty well. And we may have an idea that completely contradicts theirs, but we still want to kind of take a look at all the information and kind of juggle that and say, okay, well, we need to go back to the drawing board because what our plan A was really wasn't a good plan after visiting with some of the folks locally. So I think that's pretty important.
Thanks. Chris, so Eric talked about tourism just then. Maybe talk a little bit about kind of what the split you see in the communities that you guys are in on, are these out of town folks that, what's the split between locals and the tourist aspect you're trying to achieve? I know, you got ADA compliant vehicles, so you really are in some ways providing that, essential transit service for those communities. But I noticed the one in Bastrop had the cool Visit Bastrop wrap on it. So what is that balance, and how do you see that?
Right now, it's I'm actually pulling up the dashboard for that. It's mainly locals just going from home, shopping, and then taking the vehicle back home. Right now, we would have first-time users at 8.7%. We haven't been taking tourism data yet, but that is a good idea to start taking it. But something that I would want to point out, though, is if we're talking about demographics, is, and this is the same in every deployment we've done in every location across 4 states, is 70% of the ridership is female. That's something that we never would have predicted until we started collecting this data. And me being the 6'5" dumb guy, I was thinking, oh, it must be their shoes because it's hard to walk in those, right? And that's when my wife looks at me and rolls her eyes and says, no, it's the safety factor. This is something that we as men don't think about. And the reason that a lot of the other microtransit services like Bridge and Chariot and the other ones went under, it's because it was a big, creepy looking van. And that's her words, not mine. And I had to ask my wife, like, why would you ride in our vehicle? What's so much safer about ours? And she said, it's where are you going to take me against my will in a souped up golf cart? I'm not worried about it. And that was a factor that we never would have known had we not started collecting our demographic data.
Interesting. Anne, I know you wanted to jump in with a quick comment and a quick commercial maybe.
Yeah, well, while we're all talking about all these different types of vehicles and applications for EV rural transit in small towns, we do have a webinar, this whole same group, we're going to be getting back together in August 25th. And Tyler is going to pop a link to that to register for that webinar in the chat. But we're going to be talking about all the different vehicles that are available. So I know we're only talking about a limited types of vehicles, but if you want to learn more about all the different options that are available to you and hear from more of the OEMs, tune in on August 25th. Make sure you register for that. And I did have a point or question. A couple of the presentations, they talked about stacking funding. There is something you do have to be careful about when you're stacking funding. You know, Volkswagen settlement funding does not come from the federal government. It may have been an agreement that that money comes from Volkswagen. So you can use Volkswagen settlement funding as match or double up with some federal funding or state funding, as long as your state funding didn't originate with the federal government as well. So you can stack funding as long as you don't stack federal with federal, because you cannot have federal funding as match for another federal funding opportunity. So just make sure when you're stacking that funding that you keep that in mind. And that is it. That's my point for today.
Chris or Eric, feel free to jump in on anything we may have missed so far that you wanted to touch on.
Okay. Well, I'd been sent a list of questions. Are we going over those, Eric, or are these things that you just kind of want me to
Sure.
hit on?
Yeah. If you have one of those you wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of them that I think is pretty important that I've been asked a bunch of times and I don't get an opportunity to speak is, are these spaces ADA compliant? As we start seeing Chris's group, you've got, wheelchair accessible, cars, and now that we're starting to see these smaller transit vans, and I think the popularity of those are going to increase. So just our base model is 2 chargers for every 3 parking spots. And that allows an ADA compliant area in between the 2 parking spots. Now, it is not painted as such, but it does allow for that. And the reason being is we need to make sure that the utilization of those spots are available, even though it does have a hashed out area that is painted green, it's not painted blue. So that does kind of provide the ability for, the ADA compliant vehicles to be able to utilize those spots. But obviously not specifically. I think as we continue to see the growth increase, we may have some spots that are identified only ADA. We'll kind of continue to see how that continues to play out. One of the other questions I'd like to kind of identify is kind of whenever we have these conversations with most utilities, where are they at? Do they already have rates? Are they already looking at opportunities to place these charges and push them out, and kind of what other plans are? I would say with the exception of 3 or 4, no, most of them, especially in the small rural areas, they think it's going to be a long time to adopt. I was talking to some co-ops in New Mexico, and it's actually an EV driver, and he had mentioned he lives about 150 miles outside of Albuquerque. And he said, as an EV driver in a rural area, I can drive to Albuquerque and get back home. I have the ability to charge when I'm in that city, and I can come back home. But if somebody from Albuquerque wants to come to my town, they don't have that ability. They can't come down here. There's no charging and then turn around and get back. So it's actually more effective and more efficient for some of these smaller towns to have these charging infrastructure, simply because you're not going to have that opportunity to travel without it. Obviously, our goal being every 50 miles and connecting that and having just kind of a cohesive ability to drive provides a couple of things. One, the security of knowing you don't have to stop at every charger that's available on your route. If you have a 250-mile range, you're going to get to skip a few, right? Or you can actually deter from your route and the way that you're wanting to go and know that there's still going to be a charger available. And I think that's pretty important. And I would also say that we probably couldn't do that without the relationships that we have with a lot of our utilities. You look at the most recent announcement that came out, I forget the name of it, the American Highway, I can't remember, Jeff Thigpen's on here, he would probably know, and he'll thump me for not knowing it, but the original 7 utilities that kind of teamed up with that, AEP, TVA, all of those, now that's been expanded and almost doubled, and we start seeing where the outreach of this is going. The utilities see the benefit as far as what this is going to do, and obviously having the ability to be able to work with that utility to secure, whether it's consistent rates across 2 or 3 states, and makes it where now it's going to be pretty consistent for the end user to be able to charge, predict and project what those fees are going to be. We know gasoline right now is roughly 3 or a little bit more over that a gallon. What does it cost to charge your car? Well, that's going to vary based on utility rates. So being able to have that kind of consistency and seeing those kind of coalitions come through are very, very helpful, I think, for all of the drivers, or potential drivers, even more importantly.
Great. And Chris, I don't know if you saw the question come through, but besides give you a call, where do you start? And then maybe talk a little bit about the vehicles and the charging. It's charging the vehicles and kind of the cycles of, when you think about range and how long they're running before they come back and have to charge again. But yeah, where to start?
Okay, first I'll answer the technical question, then I'll go to the hard one about how to start up. So our particular vehicles, we only use 110 wall outlets. That's it. We don't do L2 charging or DC charging. That's typically for individual users. At least it's been in my experience. We like to be in control of how the vehicles are charged, and that has to do with training and everything else. But there's an absolute need for B2C charging stations all over. Our vehicles typically take about, say, if we bring a vehicle in that's totally depleted, it can take up to 12 hours to charge, but we've found that we've never brought them in completely depleted. It's generally between 6 and 8 hours. We charge them overnight on off-peak times, so it's about 5 cents per kilowatt hour. And that really makes our operational costs, at least from an equipment standpoint, it's under 50 cents a day. So, I mean, the cost savings are obvious there. Now, as far as setting them up in your own community, we have, you know what, I'm going to go on and share my secret sauce because this needs to be disseminated and I can't cover the whole country. What we found is, number one, it's very difficult to just break into a city and say, hey, hire us, without going through a long, arduous RFP process. And there's a lot of meetings. So what we found is if we can come in and develop a relationship with the Chamber of Commerce or the Downtown Association or whatever version that each city has, and we get them to hire us on a pilot program on a limited basis, say Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and we brand the shuttle. We actually white label eCab. Like, nobody really knows the name of our company in our in all of our deployed areas, and that's fine as long as the check is written out to us. I really don't mind. But like in Chandler, Arizona, we were operating side by side with Waymo, and our service was called the Chandler Wave. That was their sense of humor. It had surfboards and waves on it in Arizona. In Missouri, we had the Euclid Shuffle, we had the MX shuttle. It's basically branded to take a feel of what the local community is. And with this pilot program, we have a dashboard that's very robust. We collect the demographics of the passengers down to the granular level, minus personally identifiable information, meaning we have their gender identity, we have their estimated age. Now that's a soft number. We have number of passengers, we have where they work, where they're going, where we're picking them up, the reason for the trip. And all of this is done through a combination of sensors. We have sensors on each one of our seat belts. It's the same sensor that you guys have in your cars that will beep if your seatbelt isn't closed. All ours do is just count the number of times that are open and closed, and that's a way to get an accurate count of passengers. The rest of it, we have a proprietary AI platform, and whenever I say AI, I mean actual intelligence. It's, you know, what humans do with their brains. And the driver has a script, and the driver just asks a few non-invasive questions. If they happen to notice someone's wearing a work badge, record that. If they're picking up a bunch of people from like say IBM, we put in that we took 5 passengers from IBM. It's safe to say that they work there. And with all this data, we aggregate it and then we put it into a dashboard platform. And whenever the Downtown Association see this, whenever the Chamber of Commerce sees this, they see the obvious value add. So then typically pilot programs are about 1 to 2 years, but then after that, it has to go through the RFP process, but then we're already light years ahead of any other applicant. But now that I've told you guys how to do it, I look forward to competing with you.
Yeah, and that's a great point about, you know, the value of that information and, you know, combining it with the information transit agencies have with, you know, if you have, you know, like a Lime scooter operating in your community, you know, combining all that, I think is very valuable for transportation planners and leaders in your community. So yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Lime. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
During the pandemic, that was what kept us alive. It was this grant, and we partnered with Lime here in Austin. And since we already have the infrastructure at our shop, we're responsible of changing all of the batteries for all of the Lime mobility platforms, be it bicycle or scooter, here at our shop. And that's what kept the lights on during the social restrictions.
Eric, any last comments from you before I turn it back over to Ann?
Yeah, just one little thing kind of to hit on what I mentioned during the intro. One of the most confusing things I think about DC fast chargers is the term level 3. Level 2, it's in home, it's single phase, it's kind of slow. Level 3 could be anywhere from 50 kW to 400 kW. To kind of put that in perspective, a Walmart neighborhood market's going to run on about 380 kW. So we're talking about a charger that's pretty significant. Very few vehicles on the market right now can actually accept a 400 kW charge. The Porsche Taycan, I believe, is the only one. We know the Hummer, the F-150, and some of these, Rivian Canoe vehicles that are coming out are going to be, in that 350 to 400 range, and obviously some of the new Teslas as well. But what's interesting about that is the vehicle's ability to accept a charge is going to determine the speed of that charge. Chris mentioned having the control of knowing this 110 volt it's predictable, it's projectable, and it's safe, right? So whenever you start taking a look at which charger do I use, well, if your vehicle can only accept a 50 kW charge, you're not going to get an added benefit of going to 100 or a 200 kW charge. But obviously, if your vehicle has the ability to accept that, you could accelerate the speed at which that charges based on a lot of other variables, but it has that ability to do that. So I think whenever we're kind of taking a look at where we put these and how we put these and what do they cost and why do they cost so much, knowing what kind of size chargers to put out there makes a big difference. Downtown Durant, Oklahoma, 50 kW makes pretty good sense. On the turnpike coming out, that's not going to make good sense. You don't want to hang out at the gas station for 25 minutes. You might want to only hang out at the gas station for 6 or 7 minutes. So let's have a charger that works, for basically what we need to do. So, that's a big point. I just saw a question pop up and I can answer that really quickly. The answer is yes. There's been supply chain issues that just completely unforeseen from vendors that we thought that we could expect things from. Not only that, but more importantly, whenever you need a part to fix a charger that's failed, that's been a very difficult. I mean, I guess you can anticipate, seeing some complete charging unit issues as far as procurement and things coming in. But what if you need this certain little capacitor, or what if you need this small little relay that's proprietary to this brand of charger, and the only place you can get it is Cebu, Singapore, and you've got to wait maybe 3 or 4 or 5, 6 months for that to come in? Well, I mean, it might be that this charger can still charge some vehicles, but not all vehicles. So do you turn it down and call it maintenance, or do you let it run and let, the people that can use it, the people that can't? That's unfortunate. I don't know what the answers are. I think that we're still kind of growing through some pains and, just some educational aspects of that right now. Obviously, we can blame a lot of things on the pandemic and COVID and things like that. And nobody wants to hear it anymore. But the reality is that that's a real issue that we've been dealing with, some of these procurement and delivery. Don't you sure don't want to get the wrong part. Then you got to go through the whole process again. That takes another 2 or 3 months. So great question, whoever asked that.
If anyone wants to direct message me about the supply chain issue, we've actually found a lot of hacks for that. I got very frustrated when it took 6 months to get a BMS system for one of my vehicles. And we found out that Mexico makes the same things, and they're beholden to NAFTA, and rail does not have the same problems as ports do. But that's a different topic. But I can probably help.
Thank you, both of you. So as we wrap up, wanted to try to reiterate a few main points. When you're beginning to work on your project, you have 2 groups that you need to call immediately to get started. One is the Clean Cities Coalition closest to you. So if you don't have one, you can call one nearby, and we're always willing to help you with the project. And the second is your utility. Those are the 2 contacts you need to get started immediately before you actually want to start implementing your project, because we're going to be the ones who can help you with the planning, help you with the considerations, and making sure that your project is going to not only be successful and effective, but it's really going to be the most effective use of your funding as well. so we can help you with the funding resources. And if you have a project idea that you want to pitch, always reach out to your Clean Cities Coalition, because even if there isn't existing funding right now, if we know what your project is, what you want to do, what vehicles you want to procure, we can have that in the ready for when a funding opportunity does arise. We can call you and say, this is a perfect fit for your project, because the turnaround for these federal fundings and sometimes the state fundings is pretty quick. It's pretty short. So it saves us the step of having to go out into the public and say, hey, there's a funding opportunity. Who has an idea? If we know your idea ahead of time, we can get everything in line, and we'll more likely to have a successful project. Thank you all so much for joining us. It has been recorded and it will be posted on the Louisiana Clean Fuels YouTube channel, but I'm also going to be sharing the original file with each of the presenters here today. So they will also have copies of the whole entire recording for today. Do any speakers have any final wrap-up overview points that they would like to make before we end today?
The future is electric.
Certainly is, certainly is. So if y'all have any questions, you're going to be getting an email anyway from Zoom with my email address on there. So feel free to email me and I can connect you with any of the speakers today if you are unable to get their contact information. This is our YouTube channel. You just type in Louisiana Clean Fuels and you can go back and watch the last webinar we did last year on preparing your hometown for EVs in general. And you'll see all our future ones and other ones as well. So we have a lot of in-depth information here. And just wanted to make sure everyone had access to this before we close out. There are so many resources available on the AFDC. It is our favorite website. They have plug-in electric vehicle handbooks for workplaces, for public charging hosts, for fleet managers, and for consumers, all available for you to download. There's other educational resources. Fueleconomy.gov is fantastic for comparing vehicles and figuring out which is the most fuel efficient vehicle. Lots of apps you can get. These are the ones that you can get on your iPhone, where you can always find out where the closest charging station is the AFDC's fueling station app. And there's a lot of great video case studies. I know someone referred to their Motor Week vehicles. This is a place where you can go find those as well under the case studies. It's just a plethora of information and resources. And we do have a technical response service that can really dig deep, and just make sure you tell them you're working with a Clean Cities Coalition, and you can take advantage of this technical response service as well if you have something that is just stumping you. All right, that is it for today. And we thank you all so much for joining us. Make sure you register for the August 25th webinar, where you will hear in-depth information about all the different vehicles that you can use in the smaller towns that will help you develop and plan your small town transit system for electric vehicles. Thank you so much. And this concludes our webinar.